October 9th, 2025, 9:15 in the morning, 4 Ashwood Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. I sat in my 2022 Toyota Camry at the curb for exactly 2 minutes before I got out. I know it was 2 minutes because I watched the clock on the dashboard tick from 9:13 to 9:15, and I made myself wait until it did. The street was quiet, the way residential streets are quiet on a Thursday morning in October. A few cars gone from driveways, a sprinkler running 2 houses down, a dog barking once and then stopping. The leaves on the oak at the end of the driveway had gone yellow. I had watched that tree go yellow every October for 6 years. I had not seen it in 5. I picked up my clipboard from the passenger seat. I checked the assignment sheet clipped to the top. The property address, the applicant name, the loan number, the file reference from First Meridian Lending. I picked up my appraisal bag from the back seat. I tucked the laser measure into the outer pocket. I got out of the car. The front walk was the same stamped concrete. The porch had a new light fixture, brushed nickel, which the previous one had not been. The flower beds along the foundation had been replanted. Ornamental grasses, where there used to be boxwoods. I noted it. I walked to the door. I knocked 3 times with my knuckle, the way I always knock. The door opened. Marcus Marsh was wearing a navy polo shirt and dark jeans. He had a coffee mug in his right hand. He was expecting someone he did not know. I could see that in the half-second before recognition arrived. The polite, open expression of a man ready to deal with a stranger efficiently. And then recognition arrived, and his face did what faces do. I said, "Good morning. I'm Colleen Marsh, certified residential appraiser, assigned by First Meridian Lending for the appraisal at this address." He said nothing for a moment. The coffee mug stayed where it was. "My name is Colleen Marsh. I am 35 years old." What they did not know, what Marcus did not know when he stood in a Knox County courtroom 5 years ago in a charcoal suit and told a judge that I had never shown any professional drive and that he did not see that changing, was that I was already writing it down, that I had already decided, that the words he said into that wood-paneled room with the fluorescent lights and the court reporter and the half-empty gallery were not the end of something. They were the first line of something I was about to build. This is that story. Before I tell you what happened when I walked through that door, before I tell you what 2 hours and 23 minutes inside that house looked like, I want to ask you something. If you are watching this right now, wherever you are, whatever time it is where you are sitting, I want you to drop your location and your local time in the comments below, and I want you to hit subscribe if you haven't already, because what comes next in this story is the part that took 5 years to arrive at, and I don't want you to miss a second of it. This channel exists because some stories need to be told slowly, and this is one of them. Now let me take you back to where this began. I grew up in Knoxville, not the Knoxville of the university or the old city or the renovated neighborhoods along the river. The Knoxville of flat, residential streets and used car lots and Dollar General signs lit up orange against gray winter skies. My father, Dennis, worked at a paper mill for 22 years. He drove a white Ford F-150 with a dent in the passenger door that was there when he bought it and was still there when he sold it. He worked the early shift, and he came home smelling of wood pulp, and he ate dinner at the same time every evening, and he did not complain about it. Not once. in all the years I was watching. He did not tell me the world was generous. He did not tell me things would come easily. He also never told me what I couldn't do. That is a specific kind of love that I did not recognize for what it was until I was much older. My mother, Ruth, was a school librarian for 31 years at Holston Middle School. She shelved books the way other people breathe, automatically, constantly, without apparent effort. Our house had bookshelves in every room, including the hallway and the bathroom. She read to me every night until I told her I was too old for it. And then she kept leaving books on my pillow anyway. She never pushed. She never pressured. She just kept leaving the books. I graduated from the University of Tennessee in 2012 with a degree in communications. I was 22 years old, and I had a vague idea that I would work in marketing or public relations, maybe in Nashville, maybe further. I had a job offer from a mid-sized PR firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Not a transformative offer, but a real one, with a real salary and a real city and a real future attached to it if I worked at it. I did not take it. I will tell you why in a moment. In the autumn of 2012, a few months after graduation, I went to a professional networking event at a hotel downtown. The kind of event that seems important when you're 22 and has a cash bar and name tags printed on cardstock. I was there for 40 minutes before I was going to leave. And then I met Marcus Trellman. He was 29. He was a commercial real estate developer, or he was building toward becoming one. The distinction was somewhat fluid at the time, though he never presented it that way. He talked about properties the way chess players talk about the board, like everything on it was already in motion, already serving a purpose he had identified in advance. He was charming in the specific way that men who believe they are the most capable person in any given room are often charming, confidently, consistently, without apparent effort. I was 22 and I found it magnetic. Most 22-year-olds would have. We dated for 18 months. We married in June of 2014 at a small ceremony at a venue outside the city. 27 guests, white dahlias, my mother in a blue dress that she wore the way she wore everything, quietly and well. I took his last name. I became Colleen Marsh. I want to be precise about what happened to my career in the years that followed, because imprecision would make it easier to miss. I did not abandon it dramatically. I did not make one large sacrifice. What happened was a series of small adjustments, each of which seemed reasonable at the time and each of which, looked at together, added up to something I did not fully understand until I was 30 years old, sitting in a courthouse. Marcus's business required bookkeeping that he was not keeping up with. I began doing it. He had vendor relationships that needed managing, invoices, follow-up calls, scheduling. I managed them. He had clients who needed to feel attended to at dinners and events, and I attended to them, and I was good at it. None of this was asked of me explicitly. It accumulated the way water accumulates, quietly, without announcement, until one day you notice you are standing in it. The Charlotte offer expired. I had let it. Marcus, when I mentioned it, said something to the effect that there was plenty of opportunity in Knoxville and that the timing wasn't right for us to be living in different cities. I agreed with him. I wrote that down later too, though I did not know why at the time. December 2015. We were in the kitchen after dinner. I had been reading about real estate licensing on my phone. Not appraisal yet, just general licensing, the sales associate pathway. and I mentioned it. I said I was thinking about taking a course. Marcus set his glass down and looked at me with that particular patience that is not really patience, but is a decision already made. He said, "You're not really a numbers person, Colleen." And then he changed the subject. He picked up the conversation from before I had spoken as though I hadn't, and I let him. And dinner continued, and I did not bring it up again. But I got up the next morning and I wrote it in my notebook. Not out of spite, just because I had started to understand that the things Marcus said with certainty were worth keeping track of. The autumn of 2017. I found a part-time bookkeeping job with a small property management company on the north side of the city. It was 12 hours a week, and it paid enough to matter, and I was good at it within the first month. I was precise and I was fast, and the owner, a woman named Patricia G., told me after 6 weeks that I had an instinct for the work. I wrote that down too. I quit 11 weeks later. I want to be accurate. Marcus did not tell me to quit. He did not issue an ultimatum. What he did was make the evenings during those 11 weeks noticeably uncomfortable. Dinner went quiet. Questions went unanswered or answered briefly. The temperature of the house changed in a way that was entirely deniable and entirely real. I told Patricia that the scheduling wasn't working out. She said she was sorry to lose me. I drove home. I wrote down the date. Early 2019, Marcus and his business partner, Kevin Strand, were at our house for dinner. Kevin was pleasant and dull in the way that some business partners are. Useful, consistent, not someone you would remember. Over the main course, I mentioned that I had been reading about the residential appraisal licensing pathway in Tennessee. It was a real pathway, a structured one. 2 courses, a state exam, supervised field hours. I had been reading about it seriously for 3 weeks. Marcus looked at Kevin and then at me, and he said, "You need serious math for that, sweetheart." Kevin smiled into his wine glass. I said nothing. I passed the bread. I refilled Kevin's water. When they had gone and Marcus was watching television, I went to the kitchen table and opened my notebook, and I wrote down the date and the words exactly as they had been said. And I underlined the word sweetheart. And I closed the notebook and put it on the shelf with the others. I do not know precisely when I understood that I was building a case. I think it happened gradually, the way most true understandings happen. Not in a flash, but in the accumulation of small observations over time, each one adding something small to a total that one day tips past a threshold you didn't know was there. What I know is that by early 2020, the notebook was full, and I had started a second one. I also know that the notebooks were not about revenge. I want to be precise about that because it matters. I was not planning anything. I was not scheming. I was documenting. There is a difference. A woman who documents is a woman who has decided that what happens to her is worth remembering. That is all I was doing, remembering in writing, so that I could not be made to doubt it later. Marcus filed for divorce in March 2020. It was the second week of the pandemic shutdown. The city was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Courts were running on reduced schedules. My attorney was Sandra Bryce, court-appointed, and she was not bad at her job. She was overloaded, the way court-appointed attorneys are overloaded, spread across too many cases with too little time to give any of them the attention they deserved. I did not blame her for what happened. I understood it. The settlement hearing was on a Thursday. The Knox County Courthouse had the particular stillness of a building running at a fraction of its usual capacity. The echoes in the corridor were different, longer. I sat at a table with Sandra and her yellow legal pad, and I watched Marcus across the room in his charcoal suit with his attorney, a man named Garrett Walsh, who had done this kind of work many times and carried himself accordingly. Garrett Walsh introduced a financial assessment prepared by a consultant. The assessment documented, in careful and measured language, that I had no demonstrable earning potential, no professional qualifications, no sustained employment history, and no trajectory that suggested income-generating capacity in the foreseeable future. Sandra made a note on her legal pad. She did not challenge it. Then, Marcus took the stand. The wood paneling in that room had gone slightly dark with age, the kind of darkness that comes from years of fluorescent light rather than sunlight. The court reporter sat at her small machine with the professional stillness of someone who has heard everything. I looked at the water stain on the ceiling tile above the gallery. I looked at Sandra's yellow legal pad. I looked at my own hands on the table in front of me. Marcus said, "Colleen has always needed direction. She's never held a steady position or shown any real professional drive. I don't see that changing." He said it, the way people say things they believe completely, not with cruelty, not with performance, but with the flat certainty of a man reporting something obvious, as though he were describing the weather, as though I were a condition to be managed, rather than a person to be considered. The judge awarded Marcus the house, the four-bedroom Craftsman at 4 Ashwood Drive, which had been appraised at $540,000, went to Marcus. I received $31,000 from the marital savings account. There was no alimony. I did not cry in that room. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry in the corridor afterward, or in the elevator, or in the parking garage. I sat in my car in the parking garage. My car, the 2013 Honda Civic that I had been allowed to keep. And I pulled out the notebook I had brought with me that day. And I opened it to a blank page and I wrote, in the margin, in the very small handwriting I use when I'm being precise, Tennessee Certified Residential Appraiser. Look it up tonight. Then I put the notebook in my bag, and I took my phone out, and I Googled it. The Tennessee Certified Residential Appraiser Licensing Pathway. 2 required pre-licensing courses, each one multi-week, online, or in person. A state licensing examination administered by the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission. 1,000 hours of supervised field work completed under the direct supervision of a licensed supervising appraiser. Total timeline, 18 to 24 months from enrollment to independent licensure. I sat in the parking garage and I read every word of it. I read it twice. Then I drove to my sister Amy's apartment in North Knoxville, where I was staying in the 2nd bedroom until I found a place of my own. Amy was at work. I sat down at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it, "What Now?" I want to tell you something about that spreadsheet. It was not dramatic. It was not a manifesto. It was a list. Course names, costs, dates, exam registration fees, supervising appraiser firms in Knoxville, monthly living expenses, and at the bottom, a projected date of independent licensure, assuming I started the first course within 30 days. The projected date was in the spring of 2022. I looked at that date for a long time, 2 years and change. I was 30 years old and I had $31,000 in a Honda Civic and a second bedroom at my sister's apartment. 2 years and change felt like a very long road from where I was sitting. I thought about what Marcus had said in that courtroom, the flat, certain way he had said it, as though he were identifying a permanent condition rather than a current circumstance. And I understood that the distance between where I was and where I needed to get to was exactly the point. Nobody was going to hand me the ending of this story. I was going to have to build every sentence of it myself. That felt in that moment at the kitchen table, less like a burden than like an instruction. I saved the spreadsheet and I made dinner. April 2020. I enrolled in the first pre-licensing course through McKissick Learning, an online real estate education provider. The cost was $340. I paid it from the $31,000. I was working part-time as a receptionist at Dr. Henley's dental practice on Kingston Pike, answering phones, managing the appointment calendar, filing insurance paperwork. It was not interesting work. It paid enough to cover my half of the rent on the 2-bedroom apartment I had found in North Knoxville, the utilities and the groceries, with a small amount left over that I put into savings every month without exception. I drove the 2013 Honda Civic to work and back. I came home in the evenings and I did the coursework. I sat at the kitchen table after dinner with my laptop and my notes, and I worked through the modules one by one, the same way I had once worked through Marcus's bookkeeping. Methodically, without rushing, checking my work. I did not tell anyone what I was studying. Not Amy, not my mother, not anyone from the years with Marcus. I built it in silence. The first course covered the principles of real estate appraisal, valuation theory, the sales comparison approach, the income approach, the cost approach, depreciation, market conditions analysis. It was dense and methodical, and I loved it. I loved the specificity of it. I loved that every conclusion required evidence and every adjustment required justification, and that nothing could be asserted without support. I thought about Marcus's testimony more than once while I was working through those modules. He had asserted things without support for years. I was learning a discipline in which that was not permitted. August 2020. I passed the first course. I enrolled in the second the same week. Appraisal procedures, USPAP compliance, report writing, complex properties. I kept going to work at Dr. Henley's. I kept coming home in the evenings. I kept building. November 2020. I passed the second course. I registered for the state licensing examination. January 2021. I sat for the Tennessee Certified Residential Appraiser examination at a testing center on the west side of the city. The exam was 3 hours and 40 minutes long. I finished in 3 hours and 12 minutes. I checked my answers. I submitted. I passed on the first attempt. My score was 84. I sat in the parking lot of the testing center for a few minutes. Then I called my mother. Ruth answered on the second ring. I told her I had passed. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "I knew you would." She said it with the same flat certainty Marcus had used in the courtroom, but pointed in the opposite direction, and it hit me differently. I held the phone and I did not say anything for a moment. I just held it and let her know I was still there. February 2021. I began my supervised field hours at Bassett Valuation Group. a residential appraisal firm in downtown Knoxville, operated by Carol Bassett, who had been a certified appraiser for 23 years and who ran her firm with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. Carol was in her mid-50s, with close cropped gray hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck, and she assessed things, people, properties, situations, with a precision that I found immediately clarifying. I shadowed Carol for 14 months. I rode in her car to every property. I carried the clipboard. I watched her move through a house the way a reader moves through a text, methodically, without rushing, noting everything, missing nothing. She taught me to read a house the way my mother had taught me to read books, patiently, attentively, with an understanding that what the surface presents and what the structure actually is are often different things. I learned the comparable sales methodology until I could apply it in my sleep. I learned how to adjust for square footage and bedroom count and lot size and condition and location and view and age of improvements. I learned how to document my reasoning in a way that would hold up to scrutiny, to write an appraisal report that another professional could pick up and follow without ambiguity. I did not tell Carol what Marcus had said about me and numbers. I did not mention the courthouse or the hearing or the spreadsheet titled, "What Now?" Those things belonged to a different room, a different version of my life, and I did not bring them into the office at Bassett Valuation Group. What I brought was attention. I brought punctuality. I brought the habit of writing things down that I had developed over years of living with a man who preferred that nothing be written down. I showed up every morning with my clipboard and my notebook, and I did the work. January 2022. Carol assigned me a complex property in Farragut, a custom home on a large lot with an unusual open-plan addition on the rear and a detached outbuilding that had been partially converted to a studio space. It was not a straightforward appraisal. The comparable sales were sparse, and the adjustments required careful analysis. I worked on the draft report for 4 days. I was thorough. I was confident in my methodology. I submitted the draft to Carol. She sent it back with 17 correction notes. 17. I counted them. I looked at those 17 notes for a long time the evening I received them. I will not pretend that it did not sting, because it did. Not because the corrections were wrong. They were not. They were correct and precisely stated. But because I had worked hard on that draft, and I had believed it was good, and 17 is a specific number that makes a clear statement. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 5:30. I was at my desk at 6:15 the next morning. I opened the report and I went through every one of Carol's 17 corrections in order from first to last, and I addressed each one, revised the comparable selection on Note 3, reworked the outbuilding adjustment on Notes 7 and 8, restructured the addendum narrative on Notes 12 through 15. I finished at 11:40. I sent the revised report to Carol at noon. She read it. She came to my desk. She looked at the report on my screen and she said, "That's the work." That was the only thing she said. She went back to her office. I opened my notebook and I wrote it down. March 2022. I completed my 1,000 supervised field hours. April 2022. I submitted my application for independent certification to the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission. June 2022. I received my Tennessee Certified Residential Appraiser license in the mail. License number T7741. I printed it on the office printer. I bought a frame at the drugstore on my lunch break. A simple black frame, 8 by 10. I hung it on the wall of my apartment above my desk when I got home that evening. I stood in front of it for a moment. Then I made dinner. I left Dr. Henley's dental practice the following week. Carol offered me a position at Bassett Valuation Group as a junior appraiser, and I accepted it. My first paycheck was $2,800 for 2 weeks of work. I looked at it the same way I had looked at my exam score and my license number. As a data point, as evidence, as one more specific detail added to the spreadsheet that had been titled, "What Now?" and had been growing ever since. By the end of 2022, I had completed 41 independent appraisals. I knew the comparable sales inventory in Knox County the way my mother knew the Dewey Decimal System. Not because I had memorized it, but because I had spent enough time inside it that the logic of it had become instinctive. I knew which neighborhoods adjusted for which features. I knew which streets commanded premiums and which ones lost value at the far end. I knew how to read the difference between a house that had been maintained and a house that had been staged. The work suited me in the way that precise, evidence-based work suits people who have spent years watching others assert things without evidence. In 2023, Carol promoted me to senior residential appraiser, and I began receiving direct assignments from lending institutions rather than working solely through the firm's general intake. The work expanded. My reputation inside the lending community, the specific community of loan officers and mortgage processors and bank appraisal departments who assign work to independent appraisers, began to accumulate in the way that professional reputations accumulate, through consistency, through accuracy, through the absence of problems. An appraiser who turns in clean reports on time is, in the world of mortgage lending, an appraiser who gets more assignments. In 2024, I was added to the approved appraiser panel for 5 lending institutions, including First Meridian Lending. By early 2025, my annual income was $78,400. I had paid off the Honda Civic and traded it in on a 2022 Toyota Camry, silver, which I paid cash for the down payment and financed the rest at a rate that reflected, among other things, a credit score I had built from the $31,000 outward over 5 years. I had moved from the 2-bedroom apartment in North Knoxville into a 1-bedroom condo in a quieter neighborhood closer to downtown, which I rented and where I had hung, in the living room across from the couch, the framed license, TR7741. In the summer of 2025, I had a conversation with Claire Moody, a woman I knew from the years with Marcus. We had overlapped in his professional circle and had stayed in occasional contact, the way people do when they share acquaintances but not intimacy. Claire mentioned, in the casual way that people mention things they assume you already know, that Marcus had a new partner. Her name was Brooke. They were living at the Ashwood Drive house together, and Marcus was trying to refinance the property to fund a new development project he was putting together. I said something neutral. I wished him well in the abstract, the way you do. I drove home. I did not call anyone. I did not do anything differently. I opened my laptop on a Thursday evening in late September 2025, and I checked my assignment queue from First Meridian Lending. There were 3 new assignments. 2 were routine. The third was 4 Ashwood Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. Applicant, Marcus D. Marsh. My old address. My old name on the file. I sat at my desk and I looked at it for a moment. The lamp on the desk, the framed license on the wall, TR7741. The quiet of the apartment around 9 in the evening. Then I accepted the assignment. I entered it in my calendar for October 9th at 9:15 in the morning. I set my alarm. I want to pause here for a moment before I tell you what happened inside the house, because this is the part of the story I want you to sit with. 5 years. 5 years from a courthouse parking garage to an assignment queue. If you have ever had someone describe your limits in public, with certainty, in front of witnesses, if you have ever sat in a room and heard someone explain to a judge or a board or a room full of people what you are not capable of, I want you to leave a comment below and tell me what you did next. Did you leave? Did you stay? Did you write something down? Because the comment section on this video is full of women who understand exactly what that parking garage felt like. And I think you should know that. Subscribe if you haven't. And now, let me tell you what happened on October 9th. October 9th, 2025, 9:15 in the morning, 4 Ashwood Drive. I parked the Camry at the curb. I sat for 2 minutes. Then I got out. I pulled my appraisal bag from the back seat. The clipboard with the assignment sheet clipped to the top. The laser measure in the outer pocket of the bag. The camera. I checked the file one more time. Property address, applicant name, loan number. I closed the folder. I walked to the door. I knocked 3 times. Marcus opened the door 30 seconds later. He was wearing a navy polo shirt and dark jeans. He had a coffee mug in his right hand. I could see from the 2 feet of open air between him and the door frame that he had been expecting someone he did not know. His whole posture was set for that, open and efficient and uninvested. And then he looked at my face. He stopped, moving entirely. The door stayed where it was, half open, with his hand on the edge of it. I said, "Good morning. I'm Colleen Marsh, certified residential appraiser, assigned by First Meridian Lending for the appraisal at this address." He said, "Colleen, what are you? Why are you?" I said, "May I come in?" There was a sound from inside the house, footsteps on the hardwood stairs, a particular sound I recognized from years of living in that house, the way the third step from the bottom has a slightly different resonance than the others. And then Brooke appeared at the top of the staircase. She was in her late 20s. Blonde hair pulled back, workout clothes, an expression of polite curiosity that shifted when she saw the look on Marcus's face to something more attentive. Marcus looked up at her. He looked at me. He stepped back from the door. I walked in. I want to describe what it is like to appraise a house you used to live in. It is not what you might expect. It is not emotional in the way that walking into a former home is supposed to be emotional. The rush of memory, the weight of former life pressing through the walls. What it is professional. Every room is a set of data points. Every surface is a condition to be assessed. The kitchen where I made 7 years of breakfasts becomes the kitchen with new quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances. An improvement I noted as approximately $22,000 in upgrades since 2020, which would be factored into the comparable adjustments. The master bathroom where I stood for 7 years of mornings becomes the master bathroom with the updated tile surround, original vanity, good light, noted. The roof becomes the roof. Original 2009 construction. Visible granule wear on the south-facing slope. Probable replacement within the next 4 to 6 years, noted. I moved through every room with my clipboard and my laser measure. I was methodical and I was thorough, and I was, as I had been taught to be, silent except for professional questions. When were the countertops installed? Marcus said, 2022. Maybe 2023. I wrote it down. Is the HVAC original to the house? I think so. Yes. I wrote it down. When was the deck added? 2021, that spring. I wrote it down. Brooke stayed near the stairs for most of the inspection, watching without speaking. She had understood something about the geometry of the room that Marcus had not yet fully processed, and she was wise enough to stand outside it. Marcus tried twice to re-establish something. I noticed both attempts the way you notice weather changing. Not with alarm, simply with awareness. The first time, he came to stand near the dining room doorway while I was measuring the living room. He said, "I didn't know you were doing this now." I moved the laser measure to the next wall. I pressed the button. I wrote the measurement on my clipboard. I did not look up. The second time was in the hallway near the base of the stairs, where the light from the window falls at an angle in October that I remembered in my body before I remembered it in my mind. He lowered his voice slightly. He said, "Colleen, I just want to say..." I said, "I need to complete the exterior measurement. Excuse me." I stepped past him and went out the front door. The exterior took 22 minutes. I measured the footprint of the main structure, the footprint of the deck addition, the attached garage. I photographed the front elevation, both side elevations, the rear with the deck. I noted the condition of the gutters. Functional, some debris. I noted the condition of the foundation visible above grade. No significant cracking. I noted the window condition. Original wood frames, some paint wear, serviceable. I wrote everything down. I came back inside. I said, "Thank you both for your time." I reached into the outer pocket of my appraisal bag, and I took out a business card and I handed it to Marcus. The card read, "Colleen Marsh, CRA, Bassett Valuation Group." And at the bottom, my license number, TR7741. He took it. He looked at it. I turned and walked out the front door. I did not look back. I walked down the front path, the same stamped concrete, and I got into my Camry. I pulled away from the curb. 4 blocks away, there was a coffee shop called Watershed on a corner that I had been to a few times before. I parked and I went in. I ordered a black coffee and a blueberry scone. I took a table by the window. I opened my laptop. I wrote the appraisal report for 2 hours and 23 minutes. I was precise and I was thorough. And I was, as I had always tried to be in that work, completely fair. The comparable sales I used were the most accurate, available properties in the immediate market area. The adjustments were defensible and well documented. The value I arrived at reflected what the data supported. I submitted the completed report to First Meridian Lending at 1:47 in the afternoon. The appraised value, $561,000, not $540,000, which was what the house had been worth in March 2020 when the judge had awarded it to Marcus. not a punitive number, not an inflated number. The fair market value as of October 9th, 2025, based on comparable sales in the subject neighborhood, adjusted for condition and improvements, and time elapsed. $561,000, which reflected, if you were a person who thought about these things, approximately $21,000 in market appreciation over 5 years, plus the value of the kitchen renovation, partially offset by the deferred roof replacement. The data supported $561,000. So that was what I wrote. I want to be precise about this. I did not undervalue his house. I was not there to hurt him. I was not there to settle anything or prove anything to anyone who was watching. I was there to do my job. I did my job. The appraisal was fair, thorough, and accurate because that is what the work requires, and that is who I had made myself into over the previous 5 years. The scone was good. I finished it. I closed my laptop. I drove home. 3 days later, Marcus called my cell phone. I was at my desk at the office. I looked at his name on the screen for a moment, and then I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the voicemail that evening on my lunch break, sitting on a bench outside a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office, with the October sun angling through the gap between buildings at the end of the street. Marcus's voice on the recording was careful and measured in a way that I recognized as the voice of a person who had spent some time deciding what to say. He said, "I just wanted to say that was very professional of you. I hope there are no hard feelings." I listened to it once. I put my phone in my bag. I went back inside. 5 weeks later, Claire Moody sent me a brief text message. Marcus's refinancing had gone through. He had his loan. The development project, presumably, was moving forward. I thought about that for a moment when I read it. I thought about the data and the comps and the 1,000 supervised hours and the 17 correction notes and the morning in the parking garage and the spreadsheet titled, "What Now?" I thought about the fact that my appraisal had helped him get what he wanted. That the professional decision I had made, the fair one, the defensible one, the only one that was available to someone doing the work correctly, had served his interests. I thought about that. And then I understood something that I want to try to say carefully, because it matters to me that I get it right. He was not entirely wrong about me. I want to say that plainly. Marcus testified in that courtroom that I had never shown any professional drive, that I had always needed direction, that he did not see that changing. He was wrong about those things. But the reason I could sit in that coffee shop and write a fair appraisal on his house, the reason the number I submitted was $561,000 and not something designed to hurt him or help him, was that I had spent 5 years learning to be the kind of professional for whom those things are not permitted. The work does not allow for personal feeling. You find the number, the data supports, and you write it down and you stand behind it. He told me I had no aptitude for independent work. My license number is TR7741. I have completed 214 appraisals, every one of them independently, every one of them supported. I did not go back to that house on Ashwood Drive. That is the thing I want you to understand about that morning. I did not go back. I arrived. There is a difference between those two things that I have spent a long time understanding, and the difference is this. Going back means you are still the person who left. Arriving means you are someone who built a road and followed it to a place you chose. My father drove a white Ford F-150 for 22 years and came home every evening smelling of work and never told me what I couldn't do. My mother shelved books in a quiet school library and left them on my pillow and never asked for anything in return. Carol Bassett sent a report back with 17 correction notes and said only, "That's the work," and meant it as the kindest thing she knew how to say. I think about all of them when I think about what it means to build something quietly. I think about the spreadsheet on the kitchen table at Amy's apartment. I think about the parking garage and the notebook and the words written in the margin in the small, precise handwriting I use when I am being serious. Tennessee Certified Residential Appraiser. Look it up tonight. I looked it up. I did the work. I showed up at the door. I want to ask you something before you go. If you are watching this, you have heard a story about a woman who was told what she was not capable of and who wrote it down and who built something from it. And I imagine that some of you, maybe many of you, have been in a room or a kitchen or a parking garage where someone said something similar to you, said it with certainty, the way Marcus said it like they were reporting a fact. What I want to know is this: what did someone tell you that you couldn't do? That turned out to be the exact thing you built your life around. Leave it in the comments. I would like to know.